You might have an ozone chamber already in it. That core technology started in Hawaii. So that is it for the slides. I did want to share with you in a very quick and hopefully somewhat logical fashion some thoughts with regards to innovation as we go forward with the US and Japan coming together. I will tell you that the basis for my experiences have largely been my work as a US-based entrepreneur in Japan, trying to raise capital from Japanese companies, trying to do strategic deals with Japanese companies, and also trying to get Japanese companies to cross-license intellectual properties into the United States. I will also tell you that over that time, we've been able to negotiate 2 term sheets with Japanese companies, but have accepted none. And I will also share with you some of the reasons as to why. But what I did want to do is really address what was laid out at the onset, the actionable items, the missing items, and the needed items. I think the first question I ask myself with regards to actionable is, 1, do we actually want to do this? Do we actually want to get Japan to be more innovative? And the answer may be obvious, but the reality is this is a very challenging task. To change a culture which has historically not necessarily gravitated towards innovation the way that we've described it today is like turning the Titanic as it's heading towards the iceberg. It is a monumental task. And frankly, you know, there's a lot of other stuff we can be doing with our time too. Just putting it out there and really just food for thought. So I think 1, you know, we have to decide if we want to undertake this monumental task. 2, we have to understand if Japan wants to do this too. And I understand we have delegates from Japan, but it's not just us, it's everybody else there. It's the government that is constantly changing. It's the economy, which is challenging. Is this the right time for Japan to undertake this kind of an initiative? Because it is one that requires a certain degree of commitment. So assuming, of course, that the answers to these questions are yes, assuming that the questions are no, then we go no further. But assuming that the questions here are yes, we go forward. So I kind of categorize what I think is missing in really 2 big buckets. The first big bucket is risk-taking, which you've heard as a big topic, big header throughout the panel conversation here today. But I wanted to add a little bit more detail to what I perceive to be considered risk-taking. 1 is the speed. The speed of action, the speed of diligence, the speed of decision-making. All of these things today are significantly longer in Japan than in competing countries or in other circumstances. So if you are an investor or an entrepreneur and you have to make a decision between, you know, different venture capitalists even, and you understand one will take longer, you won't go that way, frankly. It's just not going to happen. Our world is based upon speed. Our world is giving a return to the venture capitalist in a fast enough time, and of course convincing them that we can do that, for them to invest in us. And you know, 5 years is a long time for venture capitalists. In the terms of Japan, it's not very long at all. That's the time to build a friendship or a relationship. So I think that's the first consideration. I think what needs to also be considered here is once the decision is made, we need the Japanese company to go forward fast. Meaning that once you get to that point of, yes, let's do whatever it is you're going to do, go forward fast. Go forward and put the full thrust of the organization behind it. And that is not something I've seen happen. I see, in my experience, again, a lot of committee decisions, which go to committee decisions, which go to executive decisions, which come back down to committee decisions. And that, unfortunately, leads to more time and you know, from an entrepreneur standpoint, more, I'm going to pass, I'm going to go someplace else. I think we have to change the can't-do mentality to the can-do mentality. And it's even one we still work on here in the United States, but less so. Here, I think people would generally give you the benefit of the doubt. However, in Japan, I think the first reaction, and second and third, is probably can't do it. Not going to happen. And it's just something we have to recognize is out there and we have to overcome. I'm reading my notes because I don't want to be redundant here, and and as a result, want to go forward fast as well. I think we have to take a look at the committee structures. There, in the U.S., a lot of the organizational decision-making are by smaller companies which are flat. And flat groups tend to lead to faster action. I think that needs to be, or could be one solution to the problem there. And I think we have to also address risk ideas. What a risk idea is, it's an idea that you just throw out there. We use the analogy of throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. Here, I throw spaghetti against the wall every day, thousands of times a day, and within the organization that we run, that's okay. It's okay for us to say, oh, that's a ridiculous idea. To, you know what, that one maybe could work, but it needs some work. I've tried to throw spaghetti against the wall, and I don't want to necessarily do that anymore. It's not a good feeling necessarily today to do that. So I think that's also something we need to recognize is out there, and we need to try and address for change. So that's my risk-taking list. Quickly on the policy list, I have just a couple of really quick bullet points here. Tax structures on investment. We've actually tried to establish somewhat of an angel network in Japan, and we ran into some challenges because the tax structure on some of the dividends and some of the investments are very, very high. And as a result, some of the individual investors were not as inclined because the returns would not be as attractive. So I think that's something that needs to be addressed. Small business incentives and awards. In 2002, I recall winning the Young Entrepreneur Award in the United States for one of the companies I created. It was a big deal. Got to go to DC, got to come here, got to meet dignitaries from Congress, and I remember it being one of the things I remember very fondly of my entrepreneurship career, because here they encouraged that. I was very young and made many, many mistakes, but still very encouraged. We need to create a culture of somewhat semblance of that, an award type scenario for Japan entrepreneurs, to give them the encouragement to continue forward. There may not be necessary monetary returns, but there could be other things like awards or accolades or representation in newspapers, for example. One more thing on that point, Japan had announced a couple of years ago a $1 billion venture capital arm. I don't know if you guys know about what I'm talking about, because what I found, actually, I read it in one of the magazines, and it was odd. When I went to Japan, not many people knew about it. Well, it exists. It's out there now. It's $1 billion. They hired people from Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia, some of the big venture capital names in the Valley, to come out and help them structure it. But that was it. Then they staffed it with Japanese people from typical corporations. And the decision-making was very, very, very much committee-style decision-making. I think to date, they only invested in 25 different investments out of $1 billion. And I'm not even sure if that's going to go forward. These kinds of ideas can be outsourced here. And in the United States, in some situations, like some of the retirement funds, they are. So I think we need to take a look at creating a professional investment environment there. But let me close the door on policy, and let me talk about some of the thoughts for what could be needed as an actionable next step. I think what is very realistic and very potentially near term is joint ventures. Japan has done joint ventures in China, in India, all around the world, in Europe largely. I think we can take that model but apply it to the innovation sector. We can joint venture as companies, we can joint venture into projects, we can joint venture by taking technologies out of big Japanese companies, putting them into quick-moving US entrepreneurship type companies, and potentially even flip that back to Japan at some point when the concept is even further developed. And we can certainly talk about more of these in the sessions later on as well. The last one I would mention is I think we also need to address the language barrier, because the big challenge is not that it's difficult to understand the language differentiation. It's more difficult to understand the meaning between English and Japanese. And I can tell you in contract negotiations, for example, the meaning is everything. The intent is everything. And that's unfortunately where we have gotten hung up quite a bit. So anyway, just some thoughts, food for thought. Look forward to discussing these further. Thank you.